Hit or miss the Trump assassination attempt the other day. That's what I want to talk to you a little bit about. Hi, my name is Ross McLean. This is the McLean Chronicles you're listening to. Decided to come back and just do this quick update on the Trump assassination attempt that happened yesterday. Look, this is something that was very deeply disturbing to me. I've worked in close protection in the past. I've done it in public with a gun, and I've done it in private without a gun. I protected some very seriously internationally protected people. I protected some people who were wanted by some very bad people, let's say. I know the game. I've trained people how to do it. I know how to do it. I watched this assassination attempt on President Trump, and it left me deeply disturbed. Why? Because there was a fundamental failure here in the protection offered by the Secret Service. I've studied all the different services around the world and how they provide security and protection. The Secret Service is very good at how they do it. However, I don't think this is the same Secret Service that it was 5 or 6 years ago. Things seem to have changed. But why? Why did they miss the guy on the roof? Look, it's 101 when it comes to doing close protection work, when you're setting up a perimeter and you're doing that work. That would have been probably the first place you would want to have had covered. And without giving away too much, I don't want to talk about some of the different strategies and secrets of close protection. But one of the things you would do is you would pick out the spots where the bad guys are going to be, and you would occupy them 24 hours before the event even took place. You would have somebody in that spot. There should have been law enforcement or Secret Service on that roof. However, there it was, unattended, where this man was able to get a ladder, climb up, move around, take his time, be noticed by people on the ground, people yelling at them, trying to get law enforcement's attention, and yet there was no coverage that could stop this guy. That is fundamentally flawed. That's a mistake as big as if you're putting your hockey team out, you don't put a goalie on the ice. You just don't miss it at that level. And let me talk about the level of protection when it comes to someone like a presidential candidate or an ex-president when they have death threats out. It's much different. You know, you've got the low level, you might have a CEO who needs to go out to the opera one night and wants to drive and doesn't want to be embarrassed when he gets there in case there's any protesters or something. Then you might have a company that's under threat for some particular reason, ransom, they need better protection around their place. You up the level a little bit more. Then you'll have perhaps a person who's in the news and has received threats, credible death threats. You once again get more of a team around them. But what happens when you're doing someone at the level of President Trump, that is what you would call a no-fail security plan that you're putting around it. Now, when I say no-fail, I don't mean perfect. But what no-fail means is it is tough. It is tough. It is hard to even get close to that person to have a chance to injure them. Why? Because you have such a shell of protection, you use such strategies, you use such techniques, you have enough manpower to be able to do the job that you create a shell around that person that there ain't no way anybody is just going to half-ass get up there and get a run at the president. Just doesn't happen. Now, the men and the women, I'll talk about a little bit later in this, that do this sort of work. In the past, let me talk about the past more so than the present, because I think there's been a change. In the recent past, these people are very, very well trained. They're highly skilled. They rely on each other to know that the other one does the job that's needed to do. So, you know, one of the things about close protection is people will say things like, oh, it's your job to take a bullet for the client or something. Well, you know, in reality, that's not really your job. That's not really what you're trying to do. That's not really your goal. You know what your goal is to not get killed yourself. You know, when I did a study on past assassinations that have taken place around the world, one of the first things I like to do is take out the security person. Once they have that person out of the way, then it's easy to go in and kill the driver or the client sort of thing. So in many cases, you're really just protecting yourself. In the case of a Secret Service or a close protection team, you're protecting each other. So, for instance, you wouldn't want a teammate to go to a residence that you're coming in with a client that's under threat, and say to them, is the residence clear? And they say, oh yeah, it's clear. And all they did was drive by and not really do a complete check the way a professional would. You don't do that to your teammates at that level. Your mistake is your life. Their mistake is your life. It's that close, but they're that good, and they work at this stuff. So how was this guy able to get on a roof about 150 yards away with a rifle, pretty much in plain view? I mean, half the crowd that was on the outside of the fence saw him, and get off a shot? I have to ask the question. I'm going to tell you the questions I would be asking if I was doing the investigation into this attempted assassination of President Trump. Why was that roof not occupied? Why was that roof not covered? Somebody there was responsible for that in the plan. It's going to be very easy to figure out who that is. Now, I think I know what likely happened in this situation. We've got some other contextual problems going on, in that the Secret Service today is not the Secret Service of a number of years ago. President Biden has put in his friend, this woman, to be the director of the Secret Service. Now, I can't find out a whole lot about her online, about what her real qualifications are, but it seems that she has been a DEI hire, diversity, equity, inclusion hire, all the way up. First woman to do this, first woman to do that, first woman now in charge of the protective services. I really don't know that she's darn good enough to have earned those positions, or she was just put in there because she was a woman for doing it. She also apparently was a friend of President Biden because she served on his security detail. And then he helped her get the job. Rather interesting how everybody's friends around the Bidens who have to be in charge of investigating or protecting or prosecuting President Biden's opponents. So since this woman went in, this I can say for sure, she has said that she wants to make 30% of all the teams, Secret Service teams, with women. This is her goal. I really got to question that, and I'll get into that a little bit later when we show the video of how the women reacted to this. Women are good in close protection, but they are not the same hammers, assaulters, and protectors as the males are. And as I said, when you're protecting a presidential candidate, that is a do not fail mission. It's not time to put in, oh, well, Sally hasn't had a turn yet. Let her play at it. That's not the mission. You're missing the mission. So I got some real concerns that President Trump's team appeared to have 3 women on the close protection team. I'm concerned about that. I remember mentioning to someone about 6 months ago that I did see a change in what I thought was President Trump's protection team. He looked like he had some real serious dudes, even better than he had a year ago. I saw that the security in him was ramped up. I can tell by looking at the way the guys move, what their eyes do, their positioning, how they move as a unit. I can tell when you got a real set of pros. And he had a real set of pros. This group looked like the Keystone Cops when it got time for getting up as a group. I'm sure some of them were great. Some of them were very good. But you're there to protect and save the president's life. You're not there to be a DEI hire or any other such thing. You have to work as a team. They didn't even look like they worked as a team for doing this. So let's talk a little bit more about the team and how the team works together and how the women fit on the team. As I said, the women, they have a role in close protection. I've used women in close protection before on the perimeter to do surveillance, to do threat identification. They can quite easily walk up to someone, put a hand on them, say, hi, how are you? Check and see if they're wearing a gun or any other sort of thing. They have their place, certainly the counter surveillance, spotting people on a roof, those sort of things. The women are excellent at that. But the team that needs to be right on top of the president, okay, your job is to protect his life. Now what that usually means, and you'll see how in this case it didn't really work that well. You get up there, you have to be a human shield for the president. That's the way the Secret Service does it. They use their bodies with their persons wearing their protection to surround the client and protect him. Now, you should be large if you're going to do that. You could see that one of the women didn't even come up that tall on President Trump to be able to do it. The other thing you have to be able to do is you have to deal with in-close threats. So close quarter combat techniques you have to be able to have. You have to be able to take someone who's coming at you, going for your client, maybe going at you, and you have to put them down and finish them right on the spot in a second. You don't have time to be struggling, fighting, or getting knocked over. Now, certainly there are a lot of very strong, very talented women, no doubt about it. There's lots of women who could probably kick my ass, who are quite good with some of their stuff, but that's not everyone. And the problem is, though, are they the best? You recall Serena Williams said, even though she was the #1 tennis player in the world, if she had to play against any man, they would have cleaned her clock straight out. It wasn't even a contest. It's a different game. Well, the game of close protection is also that game. It's not a place for DEI. It's time to have the right people there. You notice one of the other things that happens, and they had trouble with this when they were going to get President Trump down off the stage. Typically, what would happen is the Secret Service would have picked him up under his arms or whatever and carried him off that stage with his feet barely hitting the ground. Trump would have been there, picked up, and they just would have carried him and whisked him off to the car. That's what they would have done. Couldn't really do that with the woman that was in there. She couldn't support his weight. It became a crowd on the stairs. But that's another thing you have to be able to do physically, is if your client or the president was hurt and on the ground, you need to be able to pick him up, carry him, and get him to safety. And that requires a lot of strength. Now, you'll notice when it looked like this group was operating together, it looked like they hadn't trained together for a long time. No one really knew what the other one was sort of doing. They were sort of getting in each other's way. That's not how it's supposed to go when it's smooth. Once you know you've got it clear, the client has to get out of there. And that's what's lacking that I saw with this team. They weren't coordinated. They weren't together. They had the women on the team. That's not optimal. They weren't the best people for the best job. And the mission in this case is protecting that man's life, not in giving someone an equal opportunity chance to get a job. So I think that really needs to be looked at in the future. So I said, I think women do excellent in close protection, counter surveillance, all sorts of work. They're great. Love to have them on my team, but in the right position. That's my take on that. And I don't trust where this lady who's running the Secret Service, her drive is just to go hit the numbers, no matter who loses their life and the consequence and with the time of her decisions. So my question is, this director, this new director, did she provide the correct resources? Did she give enough agents, law enforcement, technology, and advance work to protect the president in this case? I'm going to suspect that she didn't. That's what I would say if I'm investigating. I'm not saying this is what happened, because I don't know. But I'm saying the question I would ask is, did you give all the resources that were demanded and needed to make this a not-fail mission? Now, we're told in the past, Dan Bongino, a former Secret Service agent, who has people on the inside, said he knows for a fact for the last 6 months the Trump campaign has been asking for more Secret Service protection at Mar-a-Lago, at the Trump Tower, and on the campaign for movements. He knows that's a stone-cold fact, and he said that. And he said they were rebuffed every time, never given the resources, the additional resources they asked for. You have to ask yourself, why is that? Why is that? Why would you not provide those resources? You certainly have the money. Biden forgave, what, hundreds of billions of dollars in student loans? I think you can afford to put the right Secret Service people on the next president of the United States. So, were the correct resources provided for this one or not? Which leads me to my next point on this when we're talking about the resources. Where were the drones? I'm not aware that there were any drones that were up in the air. Number one thing you would use these days for intelligence is a drone that would have infrared on it, cameras that can come right in. You're able to surveil the whole area. You have a look at it. They'd be up the whole time looking. Anything suspicious, you would immediately point it out. Boom, someone would be sent to go check it out. Where was the technology that was needed to protect President Trump? Where was it? There's some statement from the Secret Service saying, oh no, we had all our technology out there. Well, I'm not buying it based on the results that you failed. So what happened there in terms of the technology? Now, while we're talking about technology, the next area was communications. What happened to the communications? What was the setup here? Could the agencies not talk to each other? Could no one talk to the Secret Service? Look, while that guy was spotted on the roof, crowds were looking at him, pointing at him, yelling out to law enforcement, telling them there's a guy with a rifle on the roof. I got no doubt people were calling 911 on their phones. There's a man with a gun on the roof, giving the location, the directions. That was going on. When was that communicated to the team right around President Trump? When was that communicated? I mean, to my mind, the first time that someone says a person with a rifle is seen on a roof outside, that should go straight to the team on the front. President Trump should have been taken off the stage right at that point. They should have gone up and taken him off the stage to protect him. Post that, we know that that sighting of him being on the roof was for quite a period of time. Some people are suggesting between 3 to 6 minutes. He was being looked at there. We saw that the sniper team, the counter-sniper team as they call them, that was behind President Trump's podium where he was speaking, if you will. It looked like they had eyes on and were locked on to this guy with the rifle and were not shooting, but they saw him, but they weren't shooting. Now, if they were locked on and saw a guy with the rifle lying down, aiming it towards where the president is. Now, there's some talk about whether they were allowed to shoot or not. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But once you see that, if you're asking to shoot the guy, you should also be calling and telling the Secret Service team around President Trump and say, get the president out of here. That should have been the first thing that they did. It shouldn't have been a couple of minutes going back and forth on that. As soon as you've got a danger like that, you protect the client, encircle them, get them to safety or behind protection. That's what you do. So where were the communications here? Who was communicating to who? Why did this team not know to get him out? That's a question I would be asking if I was looking at investigating this. It doesn't get any more basic than that. Trouble, 1033, get the client out. That's what it should have been. That's not what it was. That was really, really bad. Now, let me tell you what I think is probably one of the most egregious errors made during this too that we need to find out. What were the rules of engagement for the Secret Service and law enforcement on the ground? What were the rules? When were they allowed to shoot? You know, this goes back for quite a while, back to the Obama administration. He went and put in ridiculous rules of engagement for special forces in the military when they were over fighting in Afghanistan. You know, they could not shoot at people unless they were shot at first. They couldn't shoot at the Taliban if they had women by them or if there was children near them. So guess what? The Taliban guys walked around with a girl with them all the time or a child, you know, and sort of went like this to the special forces snipers. You can't hit us, because they knew they couldn't engage. They were the most ridiculous rules of engagement that resulted in the deaths of many, many U.S. forces. You know, particularly, let's go back to Joe Biden with the same ridiculous game of rules of engagement on the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Did you know that there was Marines there at the gate where that suicide bomb went off, who knew who the suicide bomber was, who saw the suicide bomber coming, who said, we want permission to take out the suicide bomber? They asked and they asked and they asked, and they were denied to take the guy out until, boom, he blew it up, and some 13 Marines, or military in any event, lost their lives. Why? Because of some ridiculous rules of engagement. You're supposed to call someone in an office or the Pentagon or who knows where before you've got the ability to go use your weapon. That was one of the things that Trump changed as soon as he came in as president. He told them all, if you need to shoot, shoot. If you need to do, do. Trump empowered the military for that. You talk to any special forces people, they will tell you about the lives that were lost because of those rules. Well, what were the rules of engagement here? You know, it looks like this anti-sniper team, we don't know if it was Secret Service or who that person worked for. It was local law enforcement, they're specialized people. It certainly looked like they had eyes on this person, and it appears that they were asking for permission to shoot. Asking for permission. They see a guy with a gun lying there aimed at the president's talking. They see him lining stuff up, and they're asking for permission to shoot. And it seems that permission didn't come, because nobody shot at that guy until after he fired some shots. The first one, which just about killed the president. I mean, that shot was so close. Had Trump not turned his head like this to look like that, just for a split second as that shot was going, he would have been dead. That bullet would have gone right through his head instead of just winging his ear. But why wasn't that guy shot? You know, if someone, let's say, jumped up on the stage, pulled out a handgun and walked towards the president with the gun out like this, walking right towards him with the gun out, I would say that they'd be entitled to shoot that person. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't that be reasonable? Well, what's the difference of someone being 130 yards away with a rifle that can easily kill at that distance and kill the president? Why didn't they shoot? We're going to have to wait and see. There's rumors online, no one knows if they're true or not, yet that the officer who was in the photo claims that he was told that he couldn't shoot and that's why he didn't shoot. We don't know if that's true, but these are the questions I would ask. What were the rules of engagement? Were they so unreasonable that these people could not do their job of protecting the lives of President Trump? What was the rules there? That's the one thing that needs to be asked. You know, there's also some speculation that after that person shot, they got the 9 or 10 shots off when he was killed, Eric Prince, once again, the former owner of Blackwater Security, who knows a thing or two, and he knows a few people in Special Forces, he says that it wasn't that sniper that took the person out. He's suggesting it was a Secret Service sniper that he says was 488 yards away. He seems to somehow even know the yardage that sniper was away. So that would mean that what? There was 2 snipers that had eyes on this guy that didn't take him out? 2 snipers that had eyes on this guy that didn't call to Trump's team on the ground and say, protect the president, get him out of there? These are some of the egregious problems that I see with this protection here. And I'm a back the blue guy. There's nothing better than a man or a woman who is trained, who can fight, who can be dangerous, who can use violence when necessary or not to protect, save other people's lives, and who are willing to give their own lives in the process for doing it. So I commend those involved who weren't involved in the incompetence or the whatever the reasons were why this failed so badly. And make no mistake, it was a failure. You know, many of the Special Forces people that I follow online who are well known and know this game very well, they're calling it a complete failure. They're saying no way it should have gone down like that. People want to see the resignation of this director of the Secret Service. I spoke to another person that I know who also is very, very involved in this area. Spoke with him, and he said it was a complete failure, what took place here. So it bothers me. It bothers me because agents could have died, law enforcement could have died. We had a firefighter who died just in there, supposedly protecting his daughter. And why? Because they're changing the institution of personal protection. And why was it done? As a political reason? My understanding was that the day after the shooting here, that Biden, the Attorney General, the head of the Secret Service, and the FBI director are all meeting to discuss what happened. Well, are they discussing what happened, or are they getting their story straight? I don't think we're going to know unless we get a true investigation into this to find out what happened. The course of history could have been changed dramatically with this assassination. Anyways, use your own common sense, look to good people to get good information, and vote so we can get good people back in government, good people who care more about the people than they do about themselves and their own pocketbook. Okay, this is Ross McLean from the McLean Chronicles. Thanks very much. Please follow and subscribe. I hope to be dealing with you more in the future.